channel, become a member here or over at the Subscribe Star. Join the Odyssey, Bit Chute, or Rumble. Rumble is going off right now. So soy boys are outraged over a video game that calls them soy boys. The Hidden and Unknown is a video game that costs $2,000 for some reason. So good luck there. But it has a Star Wars type of opening that has the soy boys outraged and crying in their soy milk. Instead of just simply looking at the game going, oh, this game's not for me, I'll just move on with my life and not play this game and go play something better. This area of the I don't know, the Kotaku, the Mary Sue, the CBR, now that you think about it, you realize like 99% of like game media, pop culture media is not just far left, but I mean it's like off the chart far left. And the white pill is that a bunch of games journalists have been let go recently, and someone in the Twitter goes, "Oh well, that's capitalism for you." And there's the little emoticon of the chocolate ice cream that I was intended as chocolate ice cream, but has come to be interpreted as something else. Um, and then you look at it and you're like, "So you saying under socialism, articles and writers that don't have an audience would be subsidized by the taxpayer?" So they would be like given a stipend to write articles that nobody reads. I mean, is that your argument? I'm not on Twitter, so I didn't respond to that. And other people said, yeah, the your games journalism articles are so political. You should probably dial that back, or maybe get some people on the right, get a fair spectrum of diversity of thought to write these articles. And then somebody responds and says, well, if you don't like it, just don't read the articles. And the guy goes, yeah, that's exactly what happened. That's why all these games journalists got fired, because nobody's reading the articles. It's like, do they even like think when they say any of these things? Anyway, so instead of just not playing these games, the soy boys don't want you. Oh, there's that long Star Wars type of screen. Whatever, $2,000. It better look cool. I don't know what's going on with the $2,000 aspect of it. The soy boys don't want you to play the game because they want to control the narrative. The opening scroll talks about how Western men have become feminine, and the feminine soy boys took that personally because do they perceive it as a negative? Probably not. I mean, probably not. They embrace their, I don't know, the spirit of the feminine and the masculine, because they are feminine. They view it, I assume, as a positive trait, but they perceive the writer calling Western men feminine as a negative. And this is pretty much just a split in worldviews, which is why I wrote this article, between sides, between the global and the national, the Sodom left and the structure and trains running on time on the right. We have a divergence in views. We roughly think masculinity is good for men and femininity is good for women, because it seems that on the large scale, this just leads to a stable society. And that doesn't mean it's some like cliche, like Hollywood John Wayne version of somebody in a cowboy hat and talking tough. It's like I would say more than half the views of these people, unfortunately, on the left and the right, you think of like how many of our views are framed by Hollywood and not by our fathers and our family and our religions and our ancestors. It's shocking the amount of globalist propaganda that is brainwashed both people on the right and left. We still have these visions of everything I learned about the South, I learned from Hollywood. Like, yeah, there's a lot of people that it takes them decades to come out of that level of brainwashing if you grew up watching TV. Decades ago. Anyway, so when you compare all this stuff to the Weimar trans kids stuff you see now, where you have parents who are having their kids undergo medical elective procedures to get their body parts removed, maybe a patriarchy is the better option. Perhaps the globalist liberalism of the post-war years, maybe that was a mistake, and it's time for a different pathway. The video game author values men in male roles and feels that women should be in female roles. Now, the soy boys don't really have a counter argument to someone's opinion, but they don't like it, so they have to find a way to frame it as a negative. So they drag in Andrew Tate, who is some sort of pimp who abuses women. I'm not sure that's anything other than poisoning the well. It's like saying Brianna Wu, Zoe Quinn, and Anita Sarkeesian represent all feminists. They're toxic. The left is happy to apply the traits of an individual to the whole as long as they're not on their side, but they get triggered when you do it to them. How dare you say that all this one individual has character traits that apply to the group that they're loosely associated with? but you guys do it to the right all the time. Oh, you got me there. So to look at the current Sodom society and think it's on the right track is insane. At least you can understand that a reasonable person might come to a different conclusion. And this video game was just an expression of one person's views. The Soyboy contingent uses a phrase, toxic masculinity. It's not a real term, it's a tool of cultural Bolsheviks to craft a narrative. You could say that soy boys and cat ladies have toxic femininity. It feels childish to have to engage with these Marxists using Frankfurt School and Saul Alinsky terms, but it kind of speaks to them on their level. They use appeal. If you saw that's it's on YouTube. It's like a socialist meeting, and there's people in their like 20s and 30s, and they're all getting together, and they're, I don't know, they're talking about their pronouns and their mental illness, and oh god, they wanted people to like, can you not clap because it triggers me? So it's like you got one person in a room full of 1,000 people, so the whole all 1,000 people have to not clap because it triggers one person. It's like, okay, we'll snap our fingers. Can you not snap your fingers? It just goes on like that. People are asking for all these things. You realize like 30% of this socialist meeting was stuff tied. And the funny thing is like when the when Stalin or Mao come along, like the guys who are going to seize power. And once they seize power, it's like suddenly there's not a meeting with 1,000 people in it. It's a meeting with 6 people in it, and there's one man sitting at the head of the table. It's like, because that's what happens when you have a room full of like seriously like 1,000. There's 1,000 people, and you look at them like, oh, these 1,000 people aren't going to make it. Like there might be one or there might be a half a dozen men in that group who have the have what it takes to seize power, but it's like they're going to be like that small oligarchy seizing power. It's not going to be a 1,000 of these idiot socialists who have all these kind of requests. It's like they're just going to be put out. You guys are going to be all working on a farm. Oh, I'd rather write poetry in this new liberal order. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Anyway, so they use appeals to emotional arguments all the time, but when you respond with a appeal to emotion yourself, they suddenly demand a fact and logic based argument. Always meet their emotional arguments with the same, because there's no defeating it. You can't win or lose on the merits because it's not based on the merits. So some of the issues in this article are dealing with men's rights, and for the toxic alt feminine left, see, we can do it too. They have a problem with rights for all people. I mean, you can like you have to learn how they speak, and then you frame things in their words, and you're always using appeals to emotion. It's like they don't really know how to deal with people who are purportedly on the right, but who are speaking in these soy boy Frankfurt School Marxist terms. Like, what about rights for all people? We feel marginalized and oppressed. Oh, but you're not. But we feel we are. It's like there's nowhere to go from a childish argument like that. They feel men's rights are an issue, so they focus on these issues. The soy boy crowd feels differently. They feel some of their perception of this system is a negative, but the game designers aren't involved with their spheres. He's focusing on a different sphere of influence. The whole article is kind of a weird thing because it didn't need to be written. It's a question of somebody has a different worldview. Okay, just accept their differences and move on. But he wrote the article to try to control someone else's opinion about the future of the West. But it feels like many articles I see on the left, they're not substantive, but they're emotionally argumentative. It rephrased the original poster's argument, but it can't defeat it because it's complicated, and they don't want to have a deep dive into the bones of the argument, which really they should. Like you took a couple hours to write this and edit this, and it just turned out to be an opinion piece when you could have taken just a little bit more mental effort and actually gone into the argument about men's rights and judicial hearings and the discrimination against men's and the men's concerns. But you don't go into any of that because you know that like men do have legitimate concerns. Why wouldn't they? It's like, oh, we feel this. It's like the BLM versus the WLM. It's just an emotional it's an emotional appeal. And a situation like that, it's like where BLM went up in flames because you go, the compromise position is ALM, to say all lives, right? And once somebody presents you with the winning argument and you don't shift positions to take it, you lose your moral high ground, and BLM immediately lost their moral high ground. They could have won. They could have went in a different direction. I mean, they're controlled by Bolsheviks. They're not going to. But like, as soon as somebody holds up that ALM side, all you would have had to do was pivot to ALM, all lives, and say, okay, you're right. We learned our lesson. All lives. We need to deal with police brutality as a whole. So now we'll change the BLM. We'll get rid of them. We'll hold up ALM, all lives matter. So now you put them in the position of saying, okay, well now let's all march together. It's the winning argument, and all you have to do is do that. But when you controlled like BLM, a little off topic, but BLM had no interest in anything other than buying homes from themselves. Anyway, so the guy doesn't get into the argument, or he feels that he can't defeat the argument. So it's, I mean, it's like a tone argument article. I see this all the time in these kind of, like, the Mary Sue type of articles, where the writer is using syntax and logical fallacies, and they'll use quotes to, like, when something is called into question, they'll put quotes around it. Like, everyone does it, but it's just so chicken s when you do that kind of stuff. It's childish. Like, whenever you read an article, I mean, this was the goal of editors. The editor corrects the writer long enough to where you go, like, yeah, we don't write like that. We're not the Mary Sue. We're not Kotaku. We write like adults. But then you have, like, you got Mary Sue, Kotaku, CBR, IGN, all those kind of, like, that kind of pop culture articles where they're swearing and they're going like my guy, yikes my guy, touch grass, and realize there's no reason to talk like that in print. This isn't some live stream where you're kicking back and you've had 2 beers already. This is an article that you have time to write and edit. I mean, there's no editors in these kind of things. Like, the days of editors gone out the window because, unfortunately, you have to pay editors. So you have to be your own editors. You have to have a little discipline. But, like, somebody at the top should be, setting the tone for the articles. Like, yeah, we just don't do that kind of childish kind of argument to put things in quotes. Like, if or reframing art. Like, God, everyone does this. Where you usually in reporting, you call people the way they want to be called as long as it's factually accurate. I'm not talking about the pronoun stuff. Like if an abortion rights group calls themselves a pro-rights group, you call them how they refer to themselves. And if a pro-choice group calls themselves pro-choice, you wouldn't call them a pro-death group, or you wouldn't call one group an anti-rights group, because that reframes the argument according to your own internal bias. So, like, to be really, I'm trying to, like, if you're under a certain age, you read this media and you think, oh, was this all how media always was? Like 20, 30, 40, 100 years ago? No, this is all the stuff you're reading now, even in, like, Newsweek and Time Magazine and what used to be mainstream articles, it's all written what sounds like in millennial speak from people who are so insanely biased. They make no pretense of trying to be impartial and unbiased. That went out the window. That went out the window, honestly, decades ago. Like, the media was always left-wing bias, almost always. Like, you'd have to go back 50 years plus to find a balanced media. But after Trump, they just took off the mask and, like, yeah, we're just going to write opinion pieces. We're the point where, like, Newsweek had the cover with Trump on they edited in this, like, they edited in a photo. They digitally manipulated a photo to have Trump and this little crying kid. But, like, then with social media, the real photo pops up and you're like, you guys reframe this argument to defame to craft a narrative against this president. It's like people relied on Newsweek, up until recently, to somewhat present the news, and you realize, yeah, that's not what National Geographic does. That's not what any of these mainstream media companies have done over the past decade. They have just taken off the mask, like, yeah, this is just Pravda. This is all just Bolshevik propaganda. Anyway, so even the Kotaku comment section, there's like 400 comments here. They're mentioning many of the concerns about men's rights and men's issues, and how courts are biased against men, and men are abused also. And the thing is, it's nice to see that. It's nice to see people finally waking up. I remember the Red Pill movie came out, and that girl did an interview. How dare you call her a girl? Yes, I did. She did an interview with some media company, the woman, and they said, like, well, yeah, we haven't seen the movie. And she's like, why are you interviewing me if you haven't even seen the movie? You just want to say, oh, it's some kind of, they want to frame it as a negative. It's like, what part of men's rights? What kind of rights for all people do you have an issue with? And they get flustered because they ultimately comes down to, it's like, this is a globalist issue where they do not want men's. So one of the deeper issues is that the globalist crowd are terrified of men forming groups, especially along tribal lines, because there's strength in community and weakness as individuals. Gentlemen hang together or hang separately, which is an issue I often dive into on Odyssey and Bit Chute. And I'm putting this stuff on Rumble, and I don't know the rules on Rumble. I don't know I don't know how far, I don't know what they'll allow on Rumble, because it still has to go through the App Store. The Project Truth video got yeeted off of YouTube. Who's that guy? James O'Keefe. And it's still on Rumble. I downloaded it and put it on Odyssey also. So it's just saying, oh yeah, YouTube doesn't like that, but Rumble likes it. And the thing is, I did search Rumble for some spicy videos, and there are some spicy videos on there, so that was exciting to see. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys on the next episode.